So I want to take some time. We are going to, especially now that we have these Republicans in charge of the House, the Senate, and the White House. And depending on what state you're in, you're dealing with these guys as well. We need to understand their playbook and how they do things. Because the whole goal of them right now, I mean, take a look at everything they are doing. Everything. They want to kill the Department of Education, which will be a nightmare. They want to replace funding with block grants, which the state could spend on anything, like Brett Favre, endorsed volleyball courts. That you're not going to actually spend the money on educating kids. It's going to go to football stadiums at the biggest high schools in the state. That's what it's going to be. I mean, it is really. This is going to kill public education in a lot of states. You want to look at Health and Human Services. Basically, they're not going to care for you. We've had Dr. Joe on the air to talk about the real dangers to the CDC and other agencies that we depend on to keep us safe in these viruses, as these viruses are becoming much more prevalent, particularly avian flu. You can talk about any issue. I mean, they've got to basically convince you. Today I had out of the blue on Blue Sky of all places, which you can find me on Matt McNeil show on Blue Sky. On Blue Sky, these guys, I made this post about the fact that the Trump era tax cuts did not go to the middle and lower class. It went overwhelmingly to the wealthy people. And of course, out of the blue, some it was all going to middle class. It didn't. No, we know where it went. There's a reason why there is a cavitating hole within the deficit. Remember when you guys used to care about the deficit? Oh, that's right. You don't anymore, because Republicans care less about the deficit when they're in charge. But no, his tax cuts only help the wealthy people. And yet they want to continue them. And so here comes the whole dog and pony show to try to convince everyone, oh, well, this was a good idea. So you need to understand the game plan of Republicans and how they lie their way into something. And then at the end, when we find out how there it is, and it's a 5-step lying process, 5-step lying process that we have to go with. To explain this, let me introduce you to a worthless pile of skin we call Pete Stauber, who is the Minnesota 8 representative, the northeastern part of the state of Minnesota, basically the Arrowhead region, up that way. Or as I like to call him, Stubby. Pete Stauber is your standard Republican where they have their agenda. And each of these Republicans is bought and paid for by a specific group of people. Stubby's one of his biggest goals right now is to rip apart northern Minnesota, where we have some of the most pristine wilderness left in the country, in what's called the Boundary Waters Canoe Area, BWCA, as well as also Voyageurs National Park, which is up there on the border with Canada. It is our only national park we have here in the state of Minnesota. It's quite pretty if you've not been up there. It is beautiful country, and it is as that country is as it was when the first white people got there. It is pretty spectacular. If you've never spent some time up in that area, I highly encourage you to do so. Well, they discovered a few years ago that nickel and copper are in the rocks underneath a lot of this pristine wilderness. And so begins the sell job, the 5 lies of the apocalypse. I mean, the Republican Party, as it is. And it begins with the initial lie. We have this Ma and Pa mining company that wants to go in. Look, they've got shovels and they want to go in there. And they want to go out there and just, as a Ma and Pa mining company, go out there and dig up that copper and nickel, and it's going to help America. And this is small business, and they're just going to do it safe. Now, this is a massive lie. It isn't a Ma and Pa company. It's Antofagasta, which is the Chilean mining giant, which wants to rip apart northern Minnesota, strip mine it down, leave an empty, smoldering carcass of a state, and walk away with all the money. And Pete Stauber wants to help them do it because reasons. So there's initial lie. And they also don't want to talk about exactly what it is. It's the sulfide ore processing that they do basically leaves sulfur dioxide behind. It's one of the most toxic things. This is not something new that's been pushed here. This is something that's been pushed for a long time. And when this was initially brought forward, Mark Dayton, who was the previous governor before Governor Walz, actually went out and toured mines that had done this kind of mining. And the truth is, it's never been done environmentally safe. It is exactly what it is. It's an environmental disaster. And it's 500 years before nature can kind of deal with the runoff from this type of mining. There are mines in the Montana area, in Michigan, where basically they're still 200 and 300 years away from being able to be usable land again because there's no way to do this. But of course, that's not part of the initial story, but that's the initial lie. They also will bring up jobs. We're going to give 7,000 people jobs, which kind of ignores the fact that 125,000 people in his district alone are dependent, or just on the Iron Range up in the Arrowhead region up there, are dependent on tourism. Those are all tourism jobs, 125,000. You're jeopardizing 125,000 jobs for 7,000 jobs. That's not a really good thing. Then comes the second lie. Oh, you liberals. That's the second line. Because it doesn't take long to realize, wait a second, this isn't a mom and pop organization. This is Antofagasta. This is a major thing. And boy, this is an insanely dangerous way to mine this product. You are going to destroy one of the last remaining nature areas of the country. And on top of that, not only do you have the liberals and the people who are the environmentalists and the people who live there saying, wait a second, this isn't a good idea. But you also have Native American tribes, especially in Minnesota, who are the smartest ones here about the environment, period. The Native Americans, we should listen to every damn thing they say because they're right. Always they are right. And yet now, to get this going through, he has to kick back all these liberals with their enviro-terrorism and Native Americans. What are you talking about? This is going to be fine. Hey, get the local police to round them all up and chuck them into jail. We'll charge them with crimes later. That is what they're really doing. So it's this whole thing where the presentation of lie number 2 is, oh, you liberals, you scamps. The truth is that they basically have to dismiss the legitimate concerns to this program, whatever the program may be. Then comes the third lie, which is they have to knock down the friendly fire. Because even within Republican circles, there's some people who are like, well, I don't know if this is the best idea to basically jeopardize the Boundary Waters Canoe area or the Department of Education or Health and Human Services or, Americans' budget for this program. I think we should do some due diligence. But you see, is for guys like Stauber, they have to push that through. They have to kind of blast through that. And they basically have to say, okay, here's the deal. And this is very specific wording they say. They don't want to hold Antofagasta, the main culprits, accountable. So they'll create a red herring, a stooge to be holding the bag at the end of it. And they'll say, hey, here's the deal. If they actually do pollute, not only will we stop it, but what we'll do, we'll stop the mining immediately, but we'll hold whoever is owning the mine at that point accountable for those actions. And it's a way for them to knock down the friendly fire arguments that maybe we should be a little bit more resistant before we plunge through with whatever policy they want to do. Then comes lie number 4, that they have moved ahead, they're doing something, and they have to stop anyone from monitoring how bad things are actually going. A great example of this is pick a state that's gone to voucher programs where they do not want you to find out that the vast majority of the vouchers do not go to public school kids. They go to kids who never once attended public school, aka private school kids who now have the public paying for their kids' private school education. States across the board, especially the Republican ones, have done everything in their power. In a case like what I'm talking about with the mining up in northern Minnesota, what will happen is all of a sudden someone will be in the boundary waters and see a whole bunch of dead fish, or they'll be up at Voyageurs National Park and they'll say, why are all the trees dying? And it will become clear something is wrong. But then Stauber comes on in there and says, how dare you start testing water and land here? That's a proprietary right of the Antofagasta mine. We're going to get black ops and drones and security people. We're going to basically stop you from even being able to look at whether or not they're polluting the area. And that's what, and they will. And so even if you're just some scientist that's in the boundary waters and you take some water, you take it back, they'll try to sue you to stop you from reporting your findings that the mine is indeed poisoning the land, because they promised that if they found out that was true, guess what? They'd shut down the mine. They don't want to do that. Henceforth, they got to stop the reality from being exposed. Finally, when they get to a point where they have taken 99.9% of all the minerals out of the ground, here's the last thing they'll do. They'll go on out there and they'll find some local idiot who said, hey, you want to buy a mine off our hands? And some guy's like, yeah, I'll buy it. Great, I got a mine. And then Antofagasta runs away after they've destroyed the land. And then the truth comes out that they've actually poisoned the land. They've poisoned the water. They've done all this stuff. And then comes the fifth lie. They lied to me. I'm just as outraged and betrayed as everyone else. No, you're not. You knew this. We all told you this was going to happen. You basically went out of your way to insult us and demean us and push us aside. We told you this was going to happen. You now all of a sudden are there and exposed as being the destroyer of some of the last native wilderness of this country. And now all of a sudden you want to present yourself as somehow a victim too. How dare they? Oh, by the way, they can't be held accountable. You can't go after Antofagasta. The state taxpayers are going to have to try to clean this up at $1 trillion cost. Gee willikers, boy, oh boy, I'd be angry. There you go. The 5 lies of your standard Republican. Displayed for you on this issue, but it applies to pretty much every one of them that they're going to do for the next 4 years.